based a lot on the Rebbe Sichos, and then we try to some way translate it to ourselves, how it will give us direction right here. You all know the Parsha is Parsha Shlach, and basically you most probably have already seen the Parsha speaks about the Meraglim, the spies that Moshe Rabbeinu sent into Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, to investigate the land and to see various aspects about it, and primarily what would be the most advisable path to come and enter the land and to conquer it. And this, as we know later on, that this initial idea of sending the spies, even though the way it is expressed in today's Parsha, it seems that Hashem initiated it and said to Moshe, send the men. But really, this is not how it happened. Later on in Chumash Devarim, Moshe recounts certain details about it, and he says that actually the Jews approached, the Eden approached Moshe in droves, in big groups, and they said, we want to send some people in front of us to find out what's going on over there. We will discuss this in a few minutes. And Moshe then asked Hashem, should I do that? And Hashem said, go ahead, do it. You should select the people, make sure they are fit for this task, and send them. Moshe went ahead and he selected hand-picked men, and the Torah actually attests and says, by the way, anybody who has difficulty with the language, please feel free to ask any word that you miss, because I'd like to keep everybody here. Moshe selected a select group of people, and the Torah says that they were Rosh Bnei Yisrael, they were the heads of Bnei Yisrael, they were really leaders in the community, worthy of this mission. And Rashi says, which again you probably already saw, that Be'esu Shol Ksherim Hoyu. At that moment they were kosher men. And elsewhere it says Tzadikim Hoyu. At that moment they were tzaddikim. They were righteous and good and trustworthy people. Then, of course, you already saw, if you kept the Pasha, they went and they went through the land. A lot of miracles occurred that allowed them to go through the land obtrusively, without being detected, without paying attention to them, safely going through the land, across the entire land, lengthwise and widthwise. And they came back and they represented the land just the opposite of what should have been their representation. And they actually dissuaded means reversed, held back. Now persuade, you know what persuade means? To convince to do. Dissuade is convinced not to do. Even from going to Eretz Yisrael, they said there's no way we can face these powerful people, these giants. We felt like we were grasshoppers, because they were so giant, and in their presence we felt like we were just grasshoppers. And the people accepted this, and they cried, and they protested to Moshe, and they refused to go, except for two of the spies, Yeshua and Kalev, who contradicted completely what the others said, and they said, we absolutely can go, and we can conquer it, we can be successful. This is basically the story. As a result of this, after Moshe's prayers and all that, Hashem said that the Jewish people are going to enter the land, but not this generation. This generation is going to all die out in the desert, and the next generation, their children, are going to enter the land. It says elsewhere in the Torah that this was almost what's called poetic justice, because when the Yidden refused to go and they said to Moshe, "What are you taking us in such a dangerous place?" They actually mentioned, "You're putting our children in danger. Our children are going to be destroyed." So Hashem came back to them and said, "You are going to stay in the desert, and your children are going to go to this." This is the basic story. Now, we want to understand a little deeper what happened over here. That's another mode of protest. What happened? First of all, what is the meaning of the fact that Yidden asked Moshe, "We want to send people in front of us, spies"? And how come Hashem consented, agreed to let them go? And Moshe selected these very select group of people, and they fell flat on their face. They lost it. What happened over here? In essence, this whole debate, this whole predicament, confusion that occurred over here is actually focused based on a certain principle. We all know that Hashem created the world. And Hashem has set up, established in the world certain natural ways that the world runs. In the world, there are people who are strong and people who are weak. And the stronger people normally conquer the weaker people. That's a natural thing. In general, these rules of nature, so to speak, the way the Rebbe has set it up, this is what prevails. This is how things run. And this applies to the entire world. Except to the Jewish people. The Jewish people were singled out from the entire world by Hashem, having taken them out of Mitzrayim through open miracles, taking them through the the sea, the Red Sea, giving them the Torah, he has established a different path for the Jewish people. And what is the principal difference? The Jewish people also have to be in the world. And they also have to engage in worldly activities. As a matter of fact, one of the principal things that was expected in Eretz Yisrael, and even going to Eretz Yisrael, what were they going to be doing there? Excuse me?
Working hard.
Working hard.
Working the land.
Working the land. We're going to plow and sow the land. Al Yom Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot basically are based on the agricultural cycle. Sukkot is when you gather the produce from the field. Pesach is when you sow it. Shavuos is when you harvest. It's all based on the agricultural cycle. This is what being in the land means. So what is the difference? All nations do the same thing. Hashem gave us a Torah and gave us mitzvahs in the Torah. And Hashem also gave mitzvahs to the other nations. That's known as the Sheva mitzvahs, the 7 principal mitzvahs applicable to universal laws. And these are real mitzvahs that they're obligated to do because God commanded them to do it. True, it's only 7 versus 613, but still, they have also mitzvahs. What is the principal difference? Pardon me. And the principal difference is that the other nations were instructed to live in the world, to live on the land, and their mitzvahs principally relate to how to preserve the civil and normal conduct of the world, so that the world doesn't fall apart, so that people are not on top of each other. People can live civilly and in close proximity to each other and develop commerce, develop agriculture, develop everything else that human being is supposed to develop. And all within the context, within the umbrella of how to develop a good and peaceful and accommodating life in the world. The Jewish people, they have an entirely different task. Their task is not to develop the world. Their task is not to recognize the greatness of the world that Hashem created. Their task is to recognize the greatness of Hashem that created the world. Their function and their path in life is a direct relationship with Hashem, with the Creator, where the other nations do not have that obligation at all. To give you a simple illustration of the difference, which we mentioned many times, it's quite clear. Every nation in the world, in general, one of the principal laws, one of the principal mitzvahs of the 7 mitzvahs is that you're obligated to have laws, civil laws established, and you have to have courts that enforce these laws. These laws are civil laws that allow for civilization, for society to live in peace. Such as you may not infringe on other people's property. You're not allowed to steal, to rob, to destroy other people's property. This is part of the law of the Torah for the other nations. Why? Because if you do that, you disrupt all social order. And this is in fact what is actually maintained and carried on in all civilized society. There are laws, and these laws are all based on the principle of social order. All laws, the United States and all the countries that developed laws even before the United States, are principally based on what is acceptable to society, what is beneficial to society, and what is detrimental to society. And it is an ongoing debate that is going on in the world, especially today, that because that the social attitudes have changed, therefore the laws have to change. Because the laws are based on social attitudes, on the human being, the people that live there. It is all basically to maintain the social order, to accommodate world development and be able to live in the world. We have a Torah of an entirely different base, entirely different principle. Our Torah is never going to change. It does not change with time. No matter where the social more is, the Torah is never going to change. This was the huge error that many Jewish leaders made. They felt, becoming modern people, in a modern society, you have to adjust the Torah to the modern thinking. Hence came the conservative movement, the modern movement, and so forth. Not even talking about reform. And this is a fundamental error. The Torah cannot be adjusted, is not adjustable. The Torah remains unaffected by anything that happens in the world. How is that? The world does change. The answer is that the whole principle of Torah is, the whole principle of the Jewish people is that we, in fact, although we are present in the world and we do act according to world rules and within the natural world, our actual orientation, what we actually relate to, is not world, but to God, the creator of the world. This is our principal value system. So that when we say, do not steal, what does that stand for? Not the disruption of social order. Do not steal, this is a godly command. Because this is God's society, this is God's presence. And in God's presence, things have to be run according to godly principles. When you steal, you're violating a godly principle. You are, in fact, violating and insulting the godly presence rather than your neighbor. This is the principle of Jewish life. This is the principle of Torah. And since God does not change, so too the Torah cannot change. Because the whole principle of Torah is to represent the godly presence in the world. It's nothing to do with the status of the world at all. There's a story in the Gemara, which I mentioned recently. The story in the Gemara of one of the Amoraim. You know what an Amoraim is, right? Amoraim is the scholars from the Talmud.
From the Gemara.
From the Gemara. He had a lot of special ventures that he did, investigating the world. And he did the following test, the following investigation. He wanted to know whether ants, you know what ants are? Murashkis. Whether ants have a structure, a government structure, a king. They have a king. Because ants, the ant colony, is extremely organized. A lot of cooperation. Each one is doing their own thing. And together they build a whole structure, providing for their survival, for the building for the development of the colony. So he wanted to know whether this is happening just naturally, that they're just doing their own thing, or there is actually a top-down pyramid structure. There is a king on top, there's a ruler, and then there's instruction going downwards. So he went and he made the following test. He found one of the openings, one of the holes of a colony, which is easy to identify. I'm sure you've seen them. There comes heaps of sand on top. And it was a hot summer day. The sun was baking. And he put his hand over the hole. And he put his hand over the hole. That formed a shade from the shade. So one of these ants came out of the hole. And he saw that it was shady. So in other words, it's time to come out of the hole. You don't have to hide in the hole. You can go outside. It's not so hot anymore. So he went back into his hole and called his comrades to come with him. So he went back into the hole. In the meantime, he removed his hand from the cover. He uncovered the hole again. So this spy, so to speak, ant, the front runner, comes out, and after him follow a whole bunch of the whole colony is coming out after him. They come out and they see the sun baking. He misled them. So they jump on him and kill him. He got so upset. They jump on him and kill him. You misled us, he did. So Samoyed watched this all happen, and he concluded they do not have a government. They're not organized. Because if they were organized, they would take him to court. Take him to their king for judgment. They can't do it themselves and jump over there. He got angry, so you go and jump in him. Take him to judgment.
Maybe that's the way the country runs.
In other words, this is a story in the Gemara, okay? It makes us all smile, but it's an actual story in the Gemara. And it carries an enormous message. There are two types of laws. This ant misled his comrades, and he should be punished. Because he misled his comrades. And his comrades jumped on him and killed him. Justifiably so. But there's another set of laws. A law that represents the king. Why is it a crime to do a crime, so to speak? Not because you offend your neighbor, but because you're offending the king. It's an insult to the king when things are not running properly in his country. It's a dishonor to the king when things are falling apart in this country. There is no order. There's no respect for other people's property. Why? Because each person has his property by order of the king. So you infringe on that, you are actually violating the king's order. That's a principle. That's a real principle of law. So this has been, so to speak, in the world in certain areas, but Jewish law and Jewish life is all based on this principle, but on a much higher level. That ordering the world is due to the fact that the world belongs to Hashem, to the King. It's not because of our own convenience and need. And therefore, when we are violating that order, we are actually insulting the King. Every infringement of interhuman activity is automatically an infringement on God's sovereignty. And that's a principle of Jewish life. So that the Jewish life and the Jewish principle and the Jewish order is based not on worldly convenience and need, but based on the fact that we are actually representing God's presence in the world. By extension, everything that we possess is a godly gift. And if we are going to go into Eretz Yisrael, as we know, we're going to Eretz Canaan and conquer the land, on what basis are we conquering the land? Because God gave us the land. God told us this is our land. This goes back all the way to the beginning of Bereshis. Beginning of Chumash Bereshis, where it says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz. Hashem created the shamayim v'ha'aretz. So Rashi, by the way, says, why does the Torah begin from telling us this creation? It begins by telling us the creation so that there will be an understanding on what basis we go and take over the land of Canaan. We did not go and take over the land of Canaan like any other country, and people just eat each other out. We went there because Hashem had decreed that this is our land. He gives it to us. And therefore, when we go there on a mission from Hashem, not on our own. As a matter of fact, in the desert, really Eden were very, very well taken care of. They had the heavenly cloud, they had the man, they had the water, they had the Mishkan, they had everything. They had the Torah. And from some perspective, they didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. Why do we need to go to Israel? We are satisfied here. But Hashem is the one who directed them. This is your land. I want you to take over Eretz Yisrael. But on what basis are we going to take this? Are we going to conquer Eretz Yisrael because we are all powerful? We are stronger than the nations that we are facing? Not at all. That's not the basis at all. This we knew from day one. He knew that when we left Mitzrayim, they were more powerful than we by a long shot because we were slaves altogether. How did we come out of there? Not because we revolted and we broke out of their land. We were taken out by a miracle. And then throughout the entire process, the Kriyas Yamsuf and so forth, this is all done for us from a higher perspective. Because this is the way Hashem wanted, this is how it happened. So now, that we are faced with entering Eretz Yisrael, and Hashem says, go to Eretz Yisrael, what should be our attitude? Hashem said to go to Eretz Yisrael. We know that we are not capable of conquering these people. But Hashem said, go, so we go on that basis. We don't question it. Just like we went through till now, we got to this point, it was all entirely godly, God carried us on His hands. And at this point, there was this, so to speak, this turn in the minds, in the Jewish mind. And at first, they said yes. We're going to Eretz Yisrael because God told us to go to Eretz Yisrael. And God is for sure going to be with us. And He's going to help us and to carry through this mission. No question about it. But what is the meaning of going to Eretz Yisrael? We're going to Eretz Yisrael, as I mentioned before. We're no longer going to live on miracles like on the man and the well that walks with us and the heavenly clouds. We're going to Eretz Yisrael so that we engage in the natural process of the world, plowing and sowing and harvesting. In a natural process. So now we have to have a different type of relationship. A natural process, even though it's still recognized that even though when you plow and sow the land, we know that why does it grow and produce its produce is because Hashem's blessing, Hashem makes it grow. But this is already a different type of combination. It's a combination of a natural effort, of human effort, and Hashem gives His blessing to it. It's not purely a godly action. Hashem blesses our effort. And therefore they said, in our attempt, in going into Eretz Yisrael, we want to do the same thing. We want to see what will be the natural way of coming to Eretz Yisrael. What are the natural means to going to Eretz Yisrael? And then we trust that Hashem will actually give us His blessing and support, and we will be successful. Even though that the comparison between us and the nations is not really a comparison, they're much more powerful, but still, we know what we have to do, and Hashem will bless our effort. Just like in anything else that a person has to do. And this is why they came, and they said, let us send messengers, spies, let them investigate the land, and give us a path that is most conducive to victory in a natural way. And to this Moshe Rabbeinu said, okay. Even though he would have preferred, and he did not ask any questions. Hashem said, go, they would go. But nevertheless, they asking this question, he said, let us send spies. We want to see how this would work out in a natural way. So he said, okay. The truth is, Rashi brings down that if Eden would not have sent the spies, then they would not even need weapons. There would be no engagement whatsoever. They would enter Eretz Yisrael in a supernatural way, the way the Rebbe carried them, Hashem carried them from Mitzrayim. They would just enter Yisrael, take it over, without any resistance whatsoever. But Eden, so to speak, got cold feet. And they said, no, we want to see how it's going to work out naturally. And this is why they asked for the spice. So at that moment, it was still an acceptable attitude. Because the truth is that, as I said, after they would enter Eretz Yisrael, they would definitely be required to do and get engaged in worldly activities. They would not be sitting and waiting for the month to come down. They would have to plow and sow the land and have all the mitzvahs that are connected with produce. So this was still, so to speak, acceptable. But what happened as a result of this fall down, of this stoop down, they went into Eretz Yisrael, and because that they were looking for a natural path to conquer Eretz Yisrael, they lost their perspective. They forgot that they never expected to take over Eretz Yisrael with their own power. Even though they're looking for the best approach. They started thinking, how are we going to ever be able to face these people? And they lost complete awareness of God's involvement in their life. This is such a close, so to speak, as a step over. Once they started looking at the natural process, they lost sight of where they're coming from altogether. And they started saying, there's no way, we can't face them. Forgot completely that this is not what their intent was in the beginning. That's why Yehoshua and Caleb, when they countered the arguments of the other 10 spies, they did not say, wait a second, these nations are not so powerful, they're not so big, they're lying. They didn't say anything like that. They said, yes, indeed, they are big and powerful, and they have huge protective walls around the cities and so forth, but we are not concerned about that. We are going there on the basis of God, Hashem's help. That was lost on the other 10 spies as a result of the fact that they got involved in this natural attitude. This is reminiscent, I mentioned to you.
What is reminiscent?
It reminds us, reminiscent, it reminds us of another similar episode. Reminiscent, okay? That's what it means, it reminds us. This is reminiscent of another similar situation. After we crossed the Yam Suf, we came out of the Yam Suf, and we went into the desert. And it says there that Moshe led the people into the desert, and they walked for 3 days straight, and they could not find water. They didn't find water. They went 3 days without water. 3 days in the desert without water is a pretty risky thing, right? And there was no complaint. He doesn't mention anything about complaining from the Eden water. They didn't complain. Why did they not complain? They didn't even think of it. They saw that Hashem is carrying them. They felt well. They felt okay. Hashem gave them sustenance without water. With water makes no difference. They were able to just go, continue, without even being aware that they're missing water for 3 days in the desert. But then they came to a place called Morah, That's what it says in the Torah. They came to a place called Morah. And in Morah there was water. But the water was bitter. Bitter water, and they couldn't drink it. At that time they woke up and they started complaining. Give us water. We can't drink this water. So the question is so obvious. What do you mean? For 3 days he had no water at all and you didn't complain. Now you have water, but it's bitter and you're complaining. And what's the explanation? The explanation is this what we're talking about here. They went for 3 days without water. They relied completely on Hashem. They had no qualms about it, no concerns. Hashem tells them, go, and they go. And they were sustained. They wouldn't even aware of the fact that it was miraculous. Later on, at the end of the 40 years, Moshe Rabbeinu talks to the Eden. Chumash Dvarim, at the end, Moshe Rabbeinu talks to the Jewish people, and he said to them, look around, 40 years, you're not even aware of the miracles that carry you through. Don't you realize that for 40 years in the conditions that you sustained, there was a constant miracle. And you weren't even aware of it. Because you completely trusted in Hashem. You said, okay, the way Hashem carries, that's the way it is. A miracle is when you expect something different. You're concerned, natural. Weren't even concerned. They're going where Hashem is leading them, and there was no questions. They came to Morah and they saw water. So what happened when they saw water? They reminded themselves, oh, you know, Yankel, we're supposed to be drinking water. What happened? We didn't drink water for 3 days. How did we live? How did we sustain? Come on. Don't you remember we are supposed to drink water? So the water reminded them that they needed water. Otherwise, they didn't even think of it. This is a similar thing that happened over here. But here it went too far. It went overboard. Here also they were going to Eretz Yisrael. And they constantly knew they were working miraculously. Hashem is carrying them because this is our national task, so to speak, our mission. Wherever we are, to represent Hashem's presence in the world. We are God's nation, we're not a nation amongst nations in the world. Now they're faced with going into Eretz Yisrael. And they have to conquer the land. So they started thinking, how are we going to conquer the land? They said, let us send spies. That's a natural way of doing it. Yes, Hashem is going to help us, but let us send spies. And this developed and went down to the point where they completely lost sight of Hashem's involvement in their task and their purpose. I started thinking that it was all dependent on natural forces, and of course that's impossible. It was impossible. The Canaanim were giants relative to the Eden. The Eden were not trained in warfare. There was absolutely no possibility of them facing these nations on a normal war field. There was a similar period, similar experience of our nation at a time of Purim. I'm sure you all know about Purim. Purim was during the time of the first destruction, when Eden were in Babel, after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. We were then under the rule of Persia. And there was this vice minister, this prime minister of the king Ahasuerus, whose name was Haman. And Haman got angry at Mordechai, got angry at the Jewish people. And he decided he's going to kill all the Jews. And he gave out a decree in the name of Ahasuerus, sent it around to 127 lands across the entire world. At this particular day, all the nations have to get up and kill all the Jews. And the Jews were not even permitted, not even able to protect themselves, even to get weapons. They were hamstrung. They were completely locked out of the whole thing. They were just sitting and waiting ducks when the day is going to come and they're going to be slaughtered. Then, of course, afterwards, it changed, and they were permitted to prepare themselves and to get weapons and so forth. But then there was still a small minority amongst 127 lands. It was an impossible, totally a lopsided comparison. And Eden was sitting there, and this whole period, since the Gzeira, since the decree, until the Purim, was close to a year, approximately 11 months. Very long time to sit under the threat of annihilation. What happened? How did Eden survive? What was going on in the Jewish mind at that time? So one thing we know, that no Jew had crossed over and said, "Oh, it's not possible to be Jewish. I'm just going the other way." No one ever thought of doing that. Nobody abandoned his nation in order to save his skin. That was totally out of the question. Didn't exist. But then perhaps, so because they trust whatever happens, they accept Hashem's decree, and they also trust Hashem is certainly going to help us. Fine. But then there is another possibility. We trust and we hope that Hashem is going to help us. However, everybody begins to think Hashem is going to help us. I'd like to figure out how that can possibly be. What's Hashem going to do? Mm-hmm. Just like we are now waiting for Mashiach to come. We all believe Mashiach is going to come. And there is no way for us to surmise how, in fact, is that going to happen. What is it going to look like? Nobody asks the question how it's going to look like. What is the scenario going to be? We have no idea. And we can't even begin to surmise, we don't even go there. This is what we believe, and however it's going to happen is unimportant to us. Even the Rambam writes that the process by which it's going to happen is not a principle in Torah. We don't need to know ahead of time how it's going to happen. We just have to know the fact of its happening. So here is the thing that it says regarding the Jewish people under Haman's threat. For a year's time, or close to a year's time, they had this threat. And not only did they not think any kind of wrong thoughts, they did not even try to make sense of their own situation. To go out and try to figure out how is Hashem going to help us? How is it going to be? Is it possible? How is it going to happen? We believe it's going to happen, but how is it going to happen? Nothing. They didn't even pay attention to that. They just were steadfast. This is in Hashem's hand. Hashem is going to do it. Whatever Hashem is going to do, that's what we accept. This is the similar union that even were facing these nations, going across, going into Eretz Yisrael. We believe that Hashem is going to help us, but we'd like to know how He's going to do it. And that was the mistake. We'd like to know how it's going to happen. And this caused this entire situation to unravel, and they were not able to withstand that nisayon, withstand that pressure, and they fell down, and they drew all the people with them. This is basically the story, the message, and what occurred over here. What does this tell us? As I mentioned before, we didn't measure everything not in terms of what it looks like in the world, but what does it look like from the Torah perspective. Because our Torah does not change according to the vibes and the winds of the world. So therefore we look on everything from a Torah perspective.
So the main thing is to believe in Hashem without trying to figure out how everything's going to come about.
Well, let me finish.
Sorry.
That's right. You're right. I remember there was a Rav, he was a young man, a young Rav. Sort of like the beginning, he was still learning and studying, and the Rebbe said to him, he wants him to be a Rav. So he complained to the Rebbe that he forgets, he can't remember. To be a Rav, you really have to remember a lot of stuff. Not just know how to figure out, but you have to remember specific shilas, specific answers. And he loses, he can't remember so well. So the Rebbe said to him, you should not pay attention to that at all. Shouldn't try to remember. You should learn. And essentially what the Rebbe was telling him, not in these words, but the message was, Hashem gave every person his neshama. Hashem gave every person his abilities, his seichel, and his ability to learn and to remember and to understand. We trust these gifts, these godly gifts. We do not create memory. We do not create understanding. We use that which Hashem gave us. So we learn, and we don't even understand how it happens, but we remember. It's a miracle. Somehow we remember, somehow we understand, somehow we progress. It is not of our doing. Our doing is only that we are using these faculties that Hashem blessed us with. We're using it, we're using the faculties, we're using the time that we have, the opportunities to learn. And with Hashem's help, our mind opens up, our heart opens up, and it sticks. Somehow it sticks. Sometimes it begins to make sense. And it becomes part of us. And we grow with it. So that even though it is absolutely necessary that we should spend time at learning, we should learn and pay attention and concentrate and be serious about it. But the end result of it is something which happens because Hashem gave us the ability for it to happen. This is how it is possible for a person. He's trying to learn and he's trying to work hard, and at the same time he has to be besimcha and not be concerned about anything. How can he not be concerned if we have to accomplish this? And I have to really, so to speak, drill it into my mind and really make myself know it and make myself remember it. That's not the way it works. Everything that we do, we are always in partnership with Hashem. Hashem gave us our neshamas. Hashem gave us the intellect and the emotional capacity. All that is demanded, asked of us, as it says, "Hakoil b'dei shomayim chutz mi'yirah shomayim." Hashem gave everything to us except yirah shomayim. The Yirusham, the effort, the sitting down to learn, this is in our hands. To do it. But how is it going to fly into, how is it going to break through our mind and we should be able to understand it? And then to remember it. And then it should actually have effect in our intellect and our emotion. That you can leave to the faculties and to the neshama that Hashem gave us. Because the fact is, as we discussed in the past, that the real result, the ultimate result, the most significant result of all our effort in the yeshiva on learning and davening is to reveal what we possess, to reveal the neshama, to reveal our intellect. We don't have to create it, we have to reveal it. So we have to do it with great joy and simcha to allow the neshama to surface. Because the neshama does not like when you are sour and unhappy. The neshama likes it when it's joyous and pleasant. So, in this case, just as well as then, just 1 second. In our own effort, it's exactly the same thing. We have to conquer the land. We have to conquer our own land. And we say, many of us say, and this I heard many, many times, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to make it. How can I ever get, break through this? And this is the same thing what the Meraglim forgot. This is not how it happens. We do our thing. All that's asked of us is to keep our seder, to keep our schedules, do our thing the way we're supposed to do. And then you'll be shocked and surprised you won't recognize yourself. What happened to me? I'm a different person. All of a sudden, this which I couldn't begin to think of yesterday, today I understand it clearly. Because the capacity for this understanding is not your making, it is the Eibusher is what helps you, is with you. And the truth is, with the greater of our enjoyment in learning, the greater our joy in learning, and our positive conviction that we will be successful, the greater, it's obvious. The better we learn, and the more our neshama surface. The better our minds work, the better our hearts work. Because that's the reality. This is how it happens.
No,
Yes.
I was just curious
Well, many times, I'm saying that this is an error, but many people think, when they sit down to learn, see that, oh, this is so far away from me. So they say, they think that it is my effort that's going to make me understand. My effort is going to bring me, open my ear to hear and to try and to absorb what's being explained, what's being taught. But the understanding itself is something which is inherent in me. It's my intelligence Hashem gave me, and Hashem is going to help me. Like I mentioned to you, I'll tell you a little scenario that happened by me. My grandson became bar mitzvah. It's going back a few years. And he's a bright boy. And he was going to Lane. He was going to Lane, the Parsha of the week. So, Shabbos morning, he already knew the Parsha, he already learned it. Shabbos morning, before the Kriya, he's standing there and he's repeating it again and again. I said, stop. Stop. It's already in your mind. You're trying to, so to speak, to know that you know. It's not going to happen. You know it because you studied, you learned it, you spent time on it. You don't have to be, so to speak, beyond that and become aware of every word that you studied. Oh, I remember studying this word. I remember learning this. It's unnecessary. This is when it becomes counterproductive. When we come to learn, we have to come to learn with our minds and let the learning seep into our minds. Not that we have a handle on what we know. It's impossible for a person to have a handle of everything that he remembers. If a person would limit that he would remember only that which he has a handle on, it's going to be this big. We have to trust our memory, trust the koyches that Hashem gave us. With this in mind, nothing stands in our way. The Gemara says that a person is obligated to say, every Yid is obligated to say, is capable of saying, first thing, when will I reach the Madrege of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? What, are you crazy? Out of your mind?
That's a high level.
Everybody has a neshama. And if you bring out the best and everything that you are capable of bringing out from your neshama, from your intellect, that you'd have no idea where that can lead you. And it's extremely important to remember that whatever effort we make, we are making it on the basis that Hashem is with us. This is what the Gemara says. Every time a Yid learns, or reads a Chumash, or learns, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also learning with him at the same time. And this is what gets registered, and this is how it seeps into his mind and his heart, and this is how it goes. So we should batzliach everyone. You should not worry about your success. Just pay attention to your schedule and your times, and always stay encouraged and hopeful and assured of success with Nebuchadnezzar's hill, because that is, in fact, what you're assured of. You're going to Motzosi Tami, right? We are assured of that.
Try, we will succeed.
Nebuchadnezzar will help everyone to succeed to the most and best of their God-given abilities.
Amen. Rabbi